All right, here we go. This is gonna be our KTM 79890 skid plate installation video. Before we kick off, I'd like to mention that we highly recommend that you use a paddock stand or a swing arm stand, because if you try to install the skid plate on the side stand, this mounting point could actually shift, because this is the foot peg bracket and you have to remove a 10mm diameter bolt. So highly recommend that you use a paddock stand, or you ask somebody to keep the bike in vertical position for you securely while you're installing the rail part of the tubing. Another thing I want to mention, that before you start the installation, you have to remove the OEM fuel tank shield or cover, as well as the OEM skid plate. Okay, this bike came to us without the OEM skid plate, so I cannot tell you what kind of tools you gotta use to remove it. It's gotta be a pretty simple process to remove it. So please go ahead and do that. And then let's move on to our supplied hardware and our recommended tools part. So this is what you're gonna get in the package, minus the tools, of course. The base of the skid plate, the tubing with the brackets welded on, right side, left side. Okay, this is the left side. This goes on the side stand side. This is the right side. The skid plate bottom part and the top part, the grill. The supplied hardware, 10 by 45 millimeter hex bolt, 10 by 100 millimeter long hex bolt, 6 by 30, 6 of them with washer, also hex. 6 of these 6 by 16 millimeter long hex head bolts with washers. 2 M8 by 20 millimeter countersunk Allen bolt. 4 6 by 16 hex head bolt plus washers. Recommended tools. Tools we'll be using: a ratchet extension, 17 millimeter, 8 millimeter hex socket. There you go, 8 mil hex, 10 mil, well, 10 millimeter also hex, and a 5 millimeter Allen socket, or it can be a simple Allen key depending on what you have. All right, so here we go. We're going to start with the left side. Thomas is going to be the technician helping us today with the installation. This part is not necessary to loosen, although we're going to mount the big frame bracket here. In case you think it's a bit tight, the fitment is tight, you can loosen this with a 10 millimeter hex socket on both sides. All right, so we're gonna go ahead with the left side mounting process. Okay, you put the M10 by 100 millimeter long bolt through. Okay, you put it through. You put this part of the bracket inside the frame, and then you just hand tighten it. You turn it a couple of times and leave it loose, okay? You don't need tools. Then we're gonna come up to the front end. You gotta line up the holes here, 1 and 2, and grab the 2 6 by 16 hex head bolt plus the washers already mounted on it, and hand thread it in. Grab the second one. Also, just hand thread it in, a couple of turns, likely about 2 or 3 turns, and leave it loose. So that means you're gonna have some play. Okay, we're gonna repeat the same thing on the right side, same process. We have the right side foundation base here. This is the right side, you can recognize it. It's a smaller bracket. Grab the 10 by 45 millimeter hex head bolt, push the bolt through, hand thread, turn it 2 or 3 times max. That's about it. Front end, you can mount a front end. Line up the mounting holes just like on the other side. Spin the bolt in and leave it nice and loose. Like so. Okay, now we're ready for the next step. Okay, now you can grab the skid plate. We also have the 5mm Allen prepared here, as well as the two M8 countersunk bolts and the M8x16 hex head bolts. They're all prepped and ready for the skid plate mounting process. Line up the mounting holes back there, and as just as before, a couple of turns on the bolt. Now grab the front one, line up the mounting hole, and this is the bottom one on the bracket. Spin it in, leave it loose. Same process on the other side. Got to line up the mounting hole as well. In case it doesn't line up automatically, you may need to pull on the tubing here or the skid plate slightly. Again, front hex bolt. Again, line up the mounting hole. If you need to pull on the skid plate a bit or the tubing, then do so. Once it lines up, spin the bolt in. Make sure that it's not going to get cross-threaded. So the skid plate's on. Now we're going to put on the grill top. Okay, now grab the remainder of the M8x16mm long bolts with the washers and the top grill and mount it. These are going to be the holes that you have to match with the holes on the grill. Okay, no tools are necessary at this point. Line up the mounting holes, hand thread it in. Same story as before, a couple of turns only. Like so. And then two more at the bottom. Nice. Leave it loose, loose, loose. Next step. Okay, now we're gonna put on the OEM plastic tank, fuel tank cover or guard or shield. Okay, for this we're gonna use each side 3 of these 6x30mm long hex head bolts plus washers, and an M8 8mm hex socket. Okay, you gotta make sure that this piece falls back into here, so you may need to press on the shield so that it pops into its place, okay? Okay. Okay, now we're gonna insert the 6mm diameter bolts. You may need to press or push or pull on the plastic tank guard to line up the mounting holes. Don't be gentle, you know, it's a very, very flexible plastic piece. We start with the top. The bottom can be a bit finicky. The angle matters a lot. Just take your time and make sure that the bolt is threading in easily. You can pull it snug at this point, it's okay, and then finish at the bottom rear end. We'll finish this side back down here. Again, this plastic is pretty flexible, so you need to pull or push on it. In this case, we have to pull down on it in order to thread in the bolt. But it's coming through nicely. and it's in place. Okay, it's pretty much the same process on the left side as well. Thomas is gonna mount the fuel tank guard, plastic guard. It's in place. Okay, now you can insert the bolts, the M6 by 30 millimeter long bolts. We kept them a little bit extra long because of the complex part of pulling the plastic guards into place, and a tad longer bolt helps a bit. So when the top bolt's in, you can go for the bottom, same deal. You can actually pull this bolt snug as well. Okay, I have to explain to you something. The right side will have a lot more tension on it at the bottom. The reason is that we didn't want to take away the ground clearance from this bike. And so in order to keep a pretty high ground clearance, we had to keep the tubing further high up, but that means it's also further out because we have the exhaust pipe running here. So that means this plastic shield will have some more tension on the bottom part in order to pull it up more. So it's not too much, as you can see, but there is some. So you have to grab it from the front bottom part, the corner down here. You grab on it and pull it back and up at the same time, right? You will pull upon it and then insert the bolt and start threading it in. Just make sure you're not going to cross thread it. That's very important. Don't cross thread the bolt. Okay, so this is going to be the technique. Again, this isn't a pressure on the shield that's going to cause any damage because it's super flexible. The tank flexes as well, and a lot of things are mounted on rubber grommets. So, okay. And that's that. So this is the mounting process. This is the installation process. We have everything in place. We have the base tubing in place. We have the skid plate as well as the top grill, and the right side, left side, OEM fuel tank guards. The torque specs for the 8mm diameter bolts is 23 Newton meter. So this is 8 mil, 8 mil, 8 mil, 8 millimeter down here as well. For the 6mm diameter bolts, it's 9.7. So this is 6 millimeter, 6 millimeter, 6 millimeter, and 6 millimeter on each side. Okay.